There's something happening in handheld gaming right now that feels different. Not louder, smarter. This isn't a new console announcement. It's not some flashy UI update or a half-baked Steam beta. It's something way more dangerous to the status quo. A quiet revolution. One that Microsoft didn't see coming. It might not be able to stop. Because while everyone was distracted by refresh rates and frame caps, something slipped through the cracks. Something that's now outperforming Windows in places it shouldn't. And if that sounds wild, just wait. The full picture doesn't even come into focus until the end of this video. Alright, now let's talk facts, because while the intro might have sounded dramatic, the numbers behind this shift are straight up disrespectful. Especially if you're sitting in Microsoft's chair. SteamOS? Yes. That SteamOS is no longer just a Steam Deck thing. Valve just pushed out official builds for third-party hardware like the Lenovo Legion GOS, and suddenly the excuses are gone. We now have identical hardware running different OSes. One with Windows, one with SteamOS. And the results aren't just surprising, they're humiliating. We're seeing SteamOS pull ahead in crucial areas. Smoother frame rates in games like Hades, 2 to 3 hours longer battery life in less intensive sessions, and a more consistent out-of-the-box experience. And this isn't cherry picking, these are across-the-board improvements. Now, here's what's wild. It's not because SteamOS has some kind of magic sauce. It's not fairy dust. It's just built for gaming. Every layer from the kernel to the sleep modes is focused on gaming performance. It suspends better, wakes faster, uses less background power. It's efficient. Compare that to Windows 11, which is still treating handhelds like tiny laptops. It loads background services, spammy pop-ups, Cortana's running corpse. Like we asked for any of that. And unless you want to spend a weekend tweaking registry settings and disabling 20 startup apps, you're burning power on stuff you don't even use. This is why so many reviewers are calling SteamOS a better experience. Not because it's flashy, because it just works better out of the box, period. But let's be clear, this isn't about Steam Deck anymore. Valve has essentially handed out a blueprint. SteamOS 3.7 is optimized for AMD-powered handhelds beyond their own hardware. And you know what that means? They're giving manufacturers the green light to join the revolution. Steam Deck is no longer the product. SteamOS is the product. Think about that strategy. They're seeding the ecosystem, not trying to beat Windows in one massive swing, but slowly building influence where it matters most. Handheld gaming. And if that sounds familiar, it's because this is literally Microsoft's old playbook. Windows didn't dominate because it was better. It dominated because it was everywhere. Valve's just reversed Uno carded them. Now here's the part where things get awkward. Microsoft clearly didn't expect SteamOS to perform this well this fast, but they're not stupid, and they've already started shifting behind the scenes. They're not making noise about it, but if you squint, you'll see the counterattack already loading. Case in point, the Xbox branded ROG Ally and the upcoming Ally X refresh. Same hardware, sure, but the OS, totally different experience. Microsoft and Asus are working together to strip Windows down to something that feels more like a console than a desktop. No more desktop wallpapers, no more background tasks eating RAM, a custom full screen launcher that pulls your entire game library into one interface. Steam, Xbox, Battle.net all in one place. They're even borrowing UI elements from the Xbox Series X dashboard, right down to the controller-based navigation. It's not officially SteamOS competition yet, but it's looking really close. And that's not a coincidence. That's Microsoft trying to make a handheld-specific version of Windows without admitting that's what they're doing. It's like they're pretending it was the plan all along. But let's be real, if SteamOS wasn't breathing down their neck, you think this would be happening? Please. They'd still be forcing teams to launch on startup and calling it synergy. So here's where it gets interesting, right? Right now, Microsoft has a massive advantage in one key area, game compatibility. SteamOS runs Linux, and while Valve's Proton layer is shockingly good at translating Windows-only games, there are cracks. Big ones. Some of the biggest online games on earth, Fortnite, Apex Legends, Destiny 2, flat out do not work. Not because of graphics, not because of dev laziness, but because of one deeply annoying system. Kernel level anti-cheat. These games require deep hooks into the OS kernel to block cheaters, and Linux isn't built to support those systems natively or safely. Valve's been trying to work around that, but it's a brick wall for now. And Microsoft? That's their get out of jail free card. Every single one of those games runs fine on Windows. No fuss, no patching, no proton layers. Just launch and go. And that right there is the crack in the armor. The chick in the chain. Because everything we've said so far, it's true. SteamOS is winning on paper. But what happens when the game you want to play just won't run? That's the strategic chokehold. Because what if I told you Microsoft knows they can't win by fighting Valve directly? Let's not sugarcoat it. Microsoft isn't used to being the underdog. They've built an entire PC dominance on inertia. Decades of it just works branding, pre-installed software, and enterprise-level comfort zones. But here's the thing. Inertia doesn't work in handheld gaming. You can't brute force your way into people's backpacks. That space is earned. And Valve, they earned it with the Steam Deck. And now Microsoft has to respond, retaliate. But not by dropping some giant Windows handheld 3000. No, their play is more subtle, and if you blink, you'll miss it. Because what they're doing isn't building new hardware. It's something way smarter, way sneakier. They're taking Windows, gutting it from the inside and disguising it as a console. The upcoming Xbox Edition ROG Ally is the first real look at this strategy. As this isn't calling it SteamOS killer, Microsoft isn't parading as revolutionary, but make no mistake. The second you boot this device, you're not looking at a normal Windows machine. You're greeted by a full screen launcher, no taskbar, no clutter, no file explorer, or useless pop-ups. Just games regardless of where you bought them. Steam, Game Pass, Epic, GOG, it doesn't matter. Everything opens through a unified Xbox interface. That's the killer move. See, one of Windows' biggest problems on handhelds is how much crap it loads behind the scenes. It's true. Explorer, background tasks, widgets, schedule updates, it eats memory, tanks battery, and feels like using a Swiss Army knife when all you wanted was a controller and start button. Or just a knife. But this version, it throws out all of that. And Microsoft's not just cleaning up the UI, they're optimizing deep. The system now uses 2 GB less RAM just by cutting the fat. The sleep mode drains a third less power than desktop Windows, and the new Xbox button doesn't just open Game Pass. It switches apps like a damn console. Discord, Steam, Battle.net, all quick swap enabled, all controller friendly. That's not accident. That's a quiet admission. They know SteamOS exposed the weak spots. They know Windows 11 wasn't built for gaming first. So instead of rewriting the OS, they're bending the rules just enough to hold the throne. Now, let's be real. This isn't Windows Lite, the way you might imagine. It's still Windows under the hood, which means the full Windows compatibility advantage is still intact. All the anti-cheat titles that break on SteamOS, they're here. All the launchers that Linux struggles with, here. Your drivers, your VPN, your RGB software that nobody actually uses but you refuse to uninstall, yep, still here. But it's not about the nerdy checklists. It's about perception. Microsoft wants you to think this is a console because they know gamers don't want to tinker. They want to play. And here's where it gets dangerous for Valve. Right now, Valve's entire growth model hinges on giving SteamOS to other vendors. That's how they plan to scale. They're hoping manufacturers like AYN, 1xPlayer, and GPD will ditch Windows and go all in on SteamOS. That's the dream. But what if Microsoft just makes Windows not suck? What if every future handheld ships with this new Xbox UI as the default and users never even know SteamOS exists? Game Pass is front and center. Every launcher just works. Anti-cheat, no problem. Valve's library, still accessible through Steam. This is how Microsoft wins without even saying a word. No billboards, no trash talk, no Steam Deck killer headlines. Just consistency, familiarity, total ecosystem control disguised as convenience. And this is the exact move they pull against Linux desktops for decades. They didn't have to beat Ubuntu in benchmarks, they just needed grandma to keep clicking the Windows logo because that's where Solitaire lived. Now it's Game Pass instead of Solitaire. Same playbook, new generation. And it gets worse for Valve. Microsoft's new Xbox handheld experience isn't just faster, it's partner powered. Asus is already in, Lenovo is likely next. And once you get a few major OEMs on board, that's checkmate, dude. Because those manufacturers don't care about Linux freedom or open platforms. They care about margins, branding, and support calls. If Microsoft offers a polished plug-and-play UI that reduces returns and customer confusion, they're in. Heck, I'm in. Valve doesn't have that leverage. They can't throw cash at Asus to partner. They can't outspend Microsoft on support. All they've got is SteamOS and passion. And don't get me wrong, that passion is powerful. It's what made the Steam Deck happen. It's why the Linux gaming scene has come this far. But in the corporate world, passion doesn't pay for firmware updates for 24/7 customer service. And that's where the trap is being set. Because if Microsoft succeeds in rebranding Windows as just another console OS, then Valve's biggest strength becomes irrelevant. SteamOS stops looking like a revolution and starts looking like a risk. And for mainstream gamers, that's a deal breaker. Because if Valve knows they can't win on compatibility, then what the hell are they planning next? Okay, so Microsoft in stealth mode, doing what they do best, packaging convenience as innovation, and quietly locking the gates before you even realize you're inside. Trojan horsing you inside. And yeah, right now they've got the upper hand in compatibility, partnerships, and sheer volume. But here's where it gets spicy. Valve's not trying to fight Microsoft head on. They're aiming somewhere else entirely. See, while Microsoft is retrofitting Windows to pretend it's a gaming first OS, Valve's out here building the real deal from the ground up. And where Microsoft is optimizing for control, Valve is optimizing for experience. That might sound soft, but in handheld gaming, it's everything. Because when you're holding a device that's smaller than your router, what matters isn't power, raw power at least. It's responsiveness, simplicity, lack of friction, and that's where SteamOS isn't just winning, it's embarrassing Windows. Let's break this down. SteamOS isn't trying to be a PC replacement. It's not chasing multitasking or spreadsheet power user. It exists for one purpose and one purpose only: to launch games as fast and smoothly as possible. The suspend and resume is instantaneous. Battery usage is optimized. The interface is clean. You turn it up and boom, you're gaming. No ads, no malware, no pop-ups, no Windows update trying to reboot mid-run. And it's not just the software. Valve's working on building a culture around this. They've embraced open source tooling. They've dropped continuous updates with zero PR fluff. They've opened SteamOS to manufacturers with no licensing fees. They're not trying to become the next Apple, they're trying to empower the next wave of Steam Decks, One X players, GPT wins, whatever. And guess what? That approach is resonating. Not with everyone, not with the normies who just want Fortnite to work, but with enthusiasts, with the modders, with the indie devs, with the people who want to hack, optimize, tweak, or just game without being babied by corporate UX teams. And this is the part Microsoft can't copy. They can slap a new UI on Windows, they can minimize background services, but they can't replicate trust. And right now, for a growing niche of hardcore gamers and devs, Valve's becoming the trusted brand. The company that actually gives a damn. For us. That might sound small, but remember, so did Linux, so did Android. And those ecosystems didn't win by outselling Apple or Windows in year one. They won by offering freedom, flexibility, a path forward that wasn't locked behind some corporate NDA or proprietary app store. Now let's zoom out, because this is where it starts to shift. If Valve can maintain performance leadership and keep expanding compatibility through product and developer partnerships, they could slowly erode Microsoft's strongest foothold. Not by converting the masses overnight, but by chipping away at the edges. Steam Deck users talking, YouTubers switching, developers optimizing for Linux, hardware partners starting to question why they're paying Microsoft licensing fees for an OS that drains more power and adds more support tickets. That's how it begins. Not with a bang, with a billion tiny cuts. Because while this OS war is unfolding on the surface, something else, something much bigger, is being quietly built behind the curtain. Not anymore. It's not Steam Deck 2, it's not Windows 12, it's not another handheld, it's something that could shift the entire definition of what a gaming platform is. Something that could make SteamOS and Windows irrelevant, or maybe merge them into something completely new. Because right now, both Valve and Microsoft are playing 4D chess in public, while a 5D game is being played off screen. And no one's talking about it. Yet. But before we get into that, let's leave you with this. Right now is the first time in over a decade where Windows looks vulnerable in the one place they thought they were untouchable. Gaming. SteamOS isn't just competing, it's outperforming. And Valve, for all their quirks and slow burn tactics, just proved that you don't need to be a $1 trillion company to shake the entire industry. All you need is a good idea, a stubborn philosophy, and a few million players tired of rebooting into safe mode. While Microsoft's busy slapping Xbox stickers on Windows handhelds and Valve is slowly brute forcing Linux into relevance, the real future of gaming platforms isn't about which OS wins. It's about who controls the ecosystem. Because the next phase of this war, it's not about frames per second or battery life. It's about services, storefronts, subscriptions, control. Microsoft doesn't care if you're using SteamOS or Windows, as long as you're still buying games through them. That's why the new Xbox handheld UI integrates every launcher. That's why they're working on verified style systems for handhelds. That's why Game Pass is getting bundled deeper into Windows at every level. They're not just competing with SteamOS, they're trying to absorb it. Meanwhile, Valve's ace in the hole isn't the Steam Deck, it's Steam itself. Because no matter what OEMs you're using, chances are your library lives in Steam. That's why Proton exists. That's why Valve's building compatibility bridges instead of exclusivity walls. Because they know it. If they own the launcher, they own the player. So what does this mean for you? It means the real choice isn't between SteamOS and Windows. It's between freedom and frictionless control. It's between ecosystems that let you move how you want and the ones that move where they want. And that choice is happening right now in your settings menu, in your bootloader, in the default OS your next handheld ships with. So here's the real kicker. What if Valve isn't just trying to beat Windows, but to replace it altogether? Not just on handhelds, but desktops. Living rooms, streaming boxes, cloud-based gaming hubs with instant suspend, multi-device sync, and zero Microsoft tax. Because when SteamOS starts showing up on desktop PCs, on partner-made consoles, maybe even inside a TV, then suddenly we're not talking about an alternative anymore. We're talking about the start of a full-stack platform, a Steam ecosystem from top to bottom. And that would be a move Microsoft can't copy. They can't react. They can react, but they can't lead. Because leading means giving up control. And Microsoft doesn't do that. Valve, for better or worse, does. So what do you think? Is SteamOS just another Linux pipe dream, or is it the beginning of a new era? And if Microsoft stealth Xbox window hybrid lands, would you jump ship for convenience, or are you holding the line? Drop your take in the comments and don't hold back. We read every single one of them. I can take the heat. And hey, if you're ever raged uninstalled Windows after an update restarted your game mid-boss fight, do the right thing. Smash that like button like it's a corrupted Windows registry. Subscribe to Level Up Gaming if you want the breakdowns no one else dares to give. Make sure that you click on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. The kind that cut through the marketing noise and tell it like it is. Every handheld, every OS, every power play, we're not just watching the game, we're watching the rules change. And if you're still here, you clearly like pain, so click this video right here where we break down how Dune Awakening might be the survival MMO that finally figures out how to make PvP actually matter. You will see a surprise guest there. Click it before your BIOS decides it's mid-time to update mid-fight. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.